Happy Sunday. Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden, broadcasting to you live from Ottawa. And when we come back, we're going to do a little bit of analysis of Mark Carney's ethical conflicts, the most conflicted prime minister in Canadian history. We'll be back in mere moments.
The prime minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist.
Thanks for joining me here on Sunday, starting a little later than usual this morning. Some technical issues with this broadcast system we use here and getting over them. Thanks for your patience. Before I begin, I wanted to thank the first person who's actually sent a picture in of themselves with Stand on Guard merch. This is Susie Sanderson, a regular viewer. Thank you so much, Susie, for sending this picture in. And I can tell you're a free speech advocate. I know that right away. And thank you for your support. It's so much appreciated. And all I can say at this point is please, if you're watching, share this broadcast with your friends and family. I guarantee you, YouTube won't share it. So we are fighting back every day. And that's what resolving to resist is all about. So Mark Carney is ethically challenged, conflicted. Before we look at specifically how many companies, 103 companies in direct conflict of interest. But let's have a look at this little summation of how bad this is for Mark Carney, but even more so for Canadians, having a prime minister this ethically conflicted.
That those assets should be publicly disclosed within 120 days, which means you'll campaign in a coming federal election, most likely within the next 120 days, and are serving as prime minister now, with Canadians not being aware of what potential conflicts of interest
What possible conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. Yes.
We have.
Let's spend most of his time in life in the private sector. There's no possible conflict of interest in your assets. It's very difficult to believe.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary.
We have big nuclear companies, including Westinghouse, Candu, and others.
I own nothing but cash and personal real estate. I mean, you start from a prior of conflict and ill will.
You resigned from more than 20 corporate boards, I think.
Not corporate boards. Most of those boards were philanthropic or charity.
You are not yet subject to ethics requirements.
I don't have any power, Rosie.
No, but would you put anything out there for Canadians to better understand your business dealings and your financial picture before you're elected?
Obviously, I'm going to comply with all the ethics guidelines, conflicts of interest guidelines, blind trust. I own nothing but cash and personal real estate.
Yes, Carney is conflicted. And here's literally the list of companies, and we'll go over some of the, but where does it start, of course? Brookfield Asset Management, where, of course, a lot of the mainstream media actually describe Mark Carney as being a employee. I'm not kidding. He was not just an employee and not just on the board, he was the chairman of the board. And it just goes from there. Brookfield Renewable Partners LP, Brookfield Infrastructure Partners LP, Brookfield Business Partners LP, Brookfield Global Transitions Fund, Scout, Urban Grid, Avada, CleanMax, India Renewables Portfolio, Synovus, Standard Solar, European Distributed Generation. And it goes on and on and on. And that's just the first 32. But of course, I can move to page 2 and it keeps going. It's an incredible 33 to 44, no, to 45. That's 12 Brookfield Property, Brookfield Renewable Energy Marketing, Brookfield Power, U.S. Holding America, Brookfield Renewable, UK Hydro. This guy is got his tentacles everywhere, up to 103 that the ethics adjudicator judged to be. And Carney has investments in over 530 American companies. So you tell me, how does Mark Carney negotiate in good faith with the United States, with Donald Trump, when he is so linked in with American corporations? This is why I say Mark Carney is the very embodiment of the corporatist nightmare come to life. And we'll be dealing with that in a few minutes in terms of how this was all predicted by novelist philosopher Ayn Rand, especially in her seminal work, Atlas Shrugged, which came out in 1957. Of course, decades before we had such a thing as green energy. The green energy scam was decades away. But she really had the prescience to see where this was going, that capitalism, free enterprise would be eroded by phony free enterprisers, by phony capitalists who were using the system to make tremendous amounts of money at the expense of other folks. And that's, I want to show this to you right now, because Canadians are leaving for good. They're leaving Canada for good in record numbers, probably because they don't think they have the opportunity to prosper. They don't see long-term gain in this country for them because it's been locked up by people like Mark Carney and his cronies. Canada's temporary population boom may be over, but its long-term resident outflow is just beginning. This is from StatsCan. StatsCan data shows emigration, the act of citizens or permanent residents permanently leaving, jumped higher in Q1 2025. Canadians left in the second highest Q1 volume on record, a trend that only gained momentum since the pandemic. So that's where we stand. Do you think, I pose this question to you, do you think Mark Carney would have won the election had he acknowledged the ethical conflicts? Had we known how many corporations he was tied to? Had we known that this was all hypocrisy with the United States, this so-called war that he was trying to start with the United States, whether it was a war of words or something else, we never were quite certain, but he played that to the hilt, didn't he? Absolutely. I'm going to show a bit of an interview with Conservative MP Michael Barrett, talking about how the Conservatives had a good idea way back in February, March, that Mark Carney was saddled with a huge amount of corporate interest that was going to make it very difficult for him to function as a Prime Minister of Canada. I'm going to show a bit of this interview because it's incredible what Michael Barrett says in terms of if we knew how much money was involved here, this would definitely be affecting not only his leadership campaign, but the subsequent federal election. Let's have a listen to this.
I was chair of Brookfield Asset Management. I ceased to be chair on the 15th, I think, of January. When I announced for leadership. Also ceased to be chair of Bloomberg as well. Ceased to be United Nations Special Envoy on Climate Action and Finance. Ceased to be a number of other things. Second, the formal decision of the board happened after I ceased to be on the board. I do not have a connection with Brookfield Asset Management. No longer have a role, obviously, as I resigned in the middle of January.
That's Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney responding to a question after the debate last night about a company he chaired the board of called Brookfield Asset Management. In the fall, the board approved a move for the company's headquarters from Toronto to the U.S. Last night, as you heard there, Carney insisted the final decision was made after he quit the board in the middle of January when he announced a run for the leadership. Shareholders did cast a final vote at the end of January, but the board Carney chaired did on 2 occasions communicate to investors before Carney quit that they unanimously supported the move to the U.S. We invited Mr. Carney on our program this evening to talk about that. Our request was declined. With us now is the Conservatives ethics critic, Michael Barrett. Hi, Mr. Barrett. Good to see you. Thank you very much for making the time.
Thanks for having me on, Bashi. Nice to see you as well.
We did reach out to the Carney campaign to get a statement on this. I just want to put part of it to you. It says in part, Brookfield Asset Management remains one of the largest investors in Canada. It continues to list on the TSC, and its parent company, Brookfield Corp, continues to be headquartered in Toronto. The changes reported are technical in nature, and with respect to jobs, Brookfield has clearly stated that Canadian operations were not impacted. If that is the case, why are you accusing Mr. Carney essentially of being more out for himself than Canada?
Well, first of all, it's important that we underline the fact that he lied. He said that he had left the company when the decision was taken. We know it was reported on October 31st that the move was to happen. And then on the 1st of December, Mr. Carney signed a letter as chair of the board stating that a unanimous decision had been taken to initiate the move. And he urged all shareholders to uphold the unanimous decision of the board that he was on to move the headquarters from Canada to Donald Trump's hometown of New York City. And he did this, Vashi, just days after Donald Trump had threatened Canada with tariffs, unjust tariffs, for the very first time.
And I do understand that point. And certainly if he were on tonight, I would be asking him about why he said what he did. But at the heart of it, what you are also insinuating, or what you're also accusing, rather, Mr. Carney of, is being, and I heard this from other people in your party today as well, being more out for himself than out for Canada. If at the heart of this move, though, it does not mean less taxes paid in Canada, it does not mean fewer jobs in Canada, and the parent company remains in Canada, how can those two things be true?
Well, these are all great questions for Mr. Carney, who tonight, like he has been over the last several weeks, has been very selective about the media appearances that he's taking. And when he does appear in front of the media, he's lying. And so we can't just take Mark Carney at his word or his friends or business associates, because last night he said something that was not true. He said something knowingly false, and that was that he wasn't chair when this decision was taken, and he absolutely was. And so the question for Mark Carney is, why would they take this action, take this step to reshore this headquarters jobs to the United States? It certainly doesn't make Canada's position any stronger with a move like this. And these are excellent questions for Mark Carney, why he wouldn't take a stand for Canada, take a stand for Canadian jobs and for Canadian investment in our Canadian economy.
We might go back to that interview later because it's quite fascinating, because Barrett essentially anticipates exactly what we learned last Friday, that Mark Carney is up to his neck in foreign investments, in corporate interests, corporate greed. And this, of course, is going to have a huge effect on how he governs. But as I've been saying from day one here, how he wants to govern is in the back room. That's Mark Carney's style of government. And he didn't want to reveal this during the election campaign because, of course, it would have had some effect. I think a largely very negative effect. But Pierre Pauli have commented on this in a ex post. And it's very interesting. Mark Carney must explain why he kept these conflicts secret from voters until after the election. Now he will be in a position to profit from big decisions, or will be forced to sit out those decisions altogether. Either way, Canadians will pay the price. Now it's absolutely fascinating what is going on here, because Canada is becoming hollowed out. And as I've said many times, this, I think, is one of the most incredible charts I've seen. And this is thanks to Marty up north for this one. But this illustrates precisely what we've been saying from day one about the Carney government and about 10 years of the Trudeau government. Employment in 9 sectors decreases and 3 increase. 2 out of every 5 workers in this country, 2 out of every 5, that's 40% of a workforce, is working for the government. Can you think of another system where you have percentages that high working for the government? Well, yes. In a communist government, technically, you've got about 100% of the population working for the government, and that leads to economic catastrophe. If we keep going in this direction, we're going to have 1 out of 2 Canadians working for the government. And this is why Canada is in such financial trouble. And I quote Marty here. Payroll employment in April decreases in 9 sectors and increases in 3. We're shifting to an economy based on people who don't produce anything. 2 out of every 5 workers in this country are employed by government. 40% of our population are leeches sucking the life out of the country and their children's future. So look at the growth sectors in the Canadian economy. Healthcare and social assistance. Well, that's moving up. Public administration. Educational services. It gets lower and lower. Construction is just barely on the positive side. Forestry, logging and support, well, that's about 0. Then it starts to go into the negative category until you get, these are all the real jobs on the left side of the page here. These are the jobs where people are actually producing products or services that are real. And that is precisely what Ayn Rand talked about in her epic novel, Atlas Shrugged. And we're going to play a brief interview, and then I'm going to read a passage from Atlas Shrugged, which I think describes Canada today. It's absolutely chilling. It's absolutely chilling how it describes Canada as we are today. Let's have a listen.
What we would not permit is the government to initiate force against people who have hurt no one, who have not forced anyone. We would not give the government or the majority or any minority the right to take the life or the property of others. That was the original American system.
When you say take the property of others, I imagine that you're talking now about taxes.
Yes, I am.
And you believe that there should be no right by the government to tax. You believe that there should be no such thing as welfare legislation, unemployment compensation, regulation during times of stress, certain kinds of rent controls and things like that.
That's right. I'm opposed to all forms of control. I am for an absolute, laissez-faire, free, unregulated economy. Let me put it briefly. I'm for the separation of state and economics, just as we had separation of state and church, which led to peaceful coexistence among different religions after a period of religious wars. So the same applies to economics. If you separate the government from economics, if you do not regulate production and trade, you will have peaceful cooperation and harmony and justice among men.
Yeah, I not only prescient, but completely relevant to the economy today. Now, I would like to read a section from the book And this is absolutely incredible. This is from Atlas Shrugged, as I said, and that interview was from the old Mike Wallace reports. And before he did 60 Minutes, Mike Wallace was recognized as one of the greatest interviewers in the United States journalism. And that was part of a series he did with CBS News. So it says, then you will see the rise of the men of the double standard. That's Mark Carney. The men who live by force, yet count on those who live by trade to create the value of their looted money. The men who are the hitchhikers of virtue. In a moral society, these are the criminals, and the statutes are written to protect you against them. But when a society establishes criminals by right and looters by law, men who use force to seize the wealth of disarmed victims, then money becomes its creator's avenger. Such looters believe it's safe to rob defenseless men once they pass the law to disarm them. But their loot becomes the magnet for other looters who get it from them as they got it. Then the race goes on, not to the ablest at production, but to those most ruthless at brutality. When force is the standard, the murderer wins over the pickpocket. And when that society vanishes in a spread of ruins and slaughter. Do you wish to know whether that day is coming? Watch the money. Money is the barometer of our society's virtue. When you see that trading is done, not by consent, but by compulsion, when you see that in order to produce, you need to obtain permission from men who produce nothing, when you see that money is flowing to those who deal, not in goods, but in favors, when you see that men get richer by graft and by pull than by work, and your laws don't protect you against them, but protect them against you, when you see a corruption being rewarded and honesty becoming a self-sacrifice, you may know that your society is doomed. Money is so noble, a medium that it does not compete with guns, and it does not make terms with brutality. It will not permit a country to survive as half property and half loot. Very, very profound words from Ayn Rand. And I think the danger is that we are fast becoming that kind of a society. Now, I want to briefly look at the ongoing MAGA controversy that's been focused and centered around Donald Trump's refusal to talk about the Epstein matter. And he put out an absolutely incredible post on Truth Social. But before I get there, I hope you all can appreciate the comment here. This is the Pam Bondi in action figure, which will go on sale at toy stores around. No, of course it won't. But I think this is a brilliant analysis of how she has become and will become the scapegoat for this whole thing, because it was on her desk. And as the Attorney General, she's the one accountable for this. But do you think for a minute that she's not following the orders of her commander-in-chief? And of course she is. But I found this post by Donald Trump to be absolutely, shall we say, incredible. Because Trump writes, what's going on with my boys, and in some cases, gals? They're all going after Attorney General Pam Bondi, who is doing a fantastic job. We're on one team, MAGA, and I don't like what's happening. We have a perfect administration. No administration is perfect. The talk of the world, and selfish people are trying to hurt it. All over a guy who never dies, Jeffrey Epstein. For years, it's Epstein over and over again. Why are we giving publicity to files written by Obama, Crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan, and the losers and criminals of the Biden administration, who con the world with the Russia hoax, 51 intelligence agents, the laptop from hell, and more. They created the Epstein files just like they created the fake Hillary Clinton Christopher Steele dossier that they used on me. And now my so-called friends are playing right into their hands. Well, I don't think that's playing in anyone's hands when you demand answers to very pertinent questions. Why didn't these radical left lunatics release the Epstein files? If there was anything in there that could have hurt the MAGA movement, why didn't they use it? They haven't even given up on the John F. Kennedy or Martin Luther King files. No matter how much success we have had securing the border, deporting criminals, fixing the economy, energy dominance, a safer world where Iran will not have nuclear weapons. It's never enough for some people. We are about to achieve more in 6 months than any other administration has achieved in over 100 years. If you say so, Don. And we have so much more to do. The left is imploding. Kash Patel and the FBI must be focused on investigating voter fraud, political corruption, Act Blue, the rigged and stolen election of 2020, according to Donald Trump, and arresting thugs and criminals instead of spending month after month looking at nothing but the same old radical left-inspired documents on Jeffrey Epstein. Let Pam Bondi do her job. She's great. The 2020 election was rigged and stolen, and they tried to do the same thing in 2024. And that's what she is looking into as AG, and much more. 1 year ago, our country was dead. Now it's the hottest country anywhere in the world. Let's keep it that way and not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Well, sorry, Mr. President, but the MAGA folks who are huge supporters, and I've always been a huge supporter of Donald Trump, are still saying, yeah, Jeffrey Epstein matters because the victims matter, because this is such a sordid case of people getting away. And I think in some cases, literally with murder, or at the very least with assault. Then that's criminal negligence when that is allowed to happen. So a lot of people are saying, yeah, Jeffrey Epstein does matter. You used to think it mattered, Mr. President. You used to say that you wanted to release those Epstein files, which you honestly seem to believe existed, as Pam Bondi did in February. But now you don't need to do that. So here's Graham Allen, a MAGA guy, says, I fully support President Trump, but saying let's not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about. Well, he says, I respectfully disagree. Sir, we need ultimate transparency to rebuild trust of our justice system to the American people. This is a big deal. And I think that's something that we can all agree on. And this goes part and parcel with the incredible distrust in government today. And we saw this too in Canada this week with this RCMP spokeswoman, part of their public affairs people. And this was Staff Sergeant Camille Habel. She identified the saying, RCMP are really after here. We're looking for people who don't reflect the values of today's RCMP, which is woke at its worst. And she talked about the fact that they are looking for people who embrace traditional values because that means they're extremist. And of course, it doesn't really even quite define what extremist is, even though the extremists in the case she was talking about, these three of the four that have been arrested for allegedly planning some kind of insurrection around Quebec City, around it's the Valcartier Army base, actually. Three of them were charged with terrorism-related charges, even though there was apparently nothing actually happened, except these people appear to be guilty of thought crimes. Now, I've talked about this all week. I think this meme is just absolutely tremendous. But it's only tremendous in terms of what it identifies about why we can't trust our government anymore, or our police forces or the institutions that we used to be not only proud of as Canadians, but could easily invest with our trust and appreciation because we knew that they were really on our side, on the side of average, hardworking Canadians. That faith has been eroded so badly under 10 years of Justin Trudeau and now Mark Carney that it's, I think, almost impossible to retrieve. And that, of course, that is the tragedy about what's going on here. Now, I just want to play. This is another example of the horrendous policy being promulgated by the Mark Carney government.
Today's meeting in Charlottetown reinforces to me that this is the most united I have seen our country in my lifetime. For the first time in a long time, you have 13 jurisdictions plus the federal government rowing in the same direction with the same goal. And given the letter we saw from the President of the United States last night, it's hard to overstate how important this is. So what's the goal? Well, it's two things. To make Canada a clean and conventional energy superpower, and to build the strongest, most inclusive economy in the G7. And as our Prime Minister has said, we are living through a hinge moment in our history. Around the globe, economies are shifting. Markets are in flux. Tariffs from our southern neighbor threaten Canadian industry and Canadian jobs, from fisheries to sawmills to auto plants to oil rigs and beyond. We did not choose this trade war, but we will win this trade war. And by winning, we will create a new era of energy prosperity where the rising tide lifts all boats and where energy transition is opportunity.
Yeah, it's a lot of rhetoric at the very best, blather at the very worst. Do you really think this country's united? And he says this when the support for Alberta independence is at an all-time high. And it's that independence movement is another example of a country coming apart at the seams and people being fed up with the lack of opportunity under the current state of Canadian Confederation, because it's not working for too many people. And when too many people say, I see no hope, they not only leave the country, but the country is left in the hands of politicians like this who are talking nonsense. And I don't know how many lapel pins anybody can have on, but that guy seems to be trying to set a record. Our natural resources minister, Mark Hobson. And it's really incredible. When I come back, I'll have more about where we are in this country and what we're going to be doing in the next couple of days, and a message for everybody. Lots happening in the next week, folks. The Universal Ostrich Farm in British Columbia that I've done quite a lot of coverage on will be coming to Ottawa on Tuesday, on the 15th. I have to confirm with the farm spokeswoman today about that, to engage in an appeal Of course, the federal government, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, has ordered that farm to cull, if I have to say that, all of its ostriches because there might have been a breakout of avian flu there last November, December. This, of course, is a grave injustice, a huge injustice, and the farm has been fighting back. So we'll be covering that on Tuesday. And hope to get some more guests on the show this week. It's been a tough couple of weeks getting people confirmed because of I think summer vacation and all of this that goes on at this time of the year. But we're doing our best to give you real journalism on this show because that's what I'm committed to, and that's what I'm dedicated to. And I can tell you this: there has never been a more dangerous time to be an independent journalism because people are getting their platforms taken away. They're being told what to say. They're being attacked by other podcasters. It's a very difficult time to be in the business of truth dissemination. And let me tell you, these platforms do their best to regulate what is being said. And I saw some of the comments earlier from a lot of you folks out there, and you're aware that there's certain words we can't even utter on these programs. And there's certain subjects we can't investigate too far. And that, of course, does not help in terms of getting behind the truth of the news. But we're going to do our best. And I invite you again, send me a picture of you in some Krayden Right Stand on Guard merch, and we'll put your picture up. And we are sending a complimentary hat to Susie Sanderson. She was the first person to actually respond to that request. And we thank you, Susie, for doing it. Thank you for being a regular viewer. Thank you for supporting the station. And I say again, please do whatever you can to encourage your friends and family to watch this broadcast, to promote this broadcast, because I'm relying on you to do that. I really have to. And I appreciate the hard work so many of you do in supporting what we do, the work we do here. It is much appreciated. And we will continue to fight, to push back, to resolve, to resist in every way possible, as that becomes more of a necessity to protect the free speech that we have left in this country. And we will continue to fight to keep that free speech and to broaden it in as any way possible. Thank you so much for watching today. This has been David Krayden broadcasting to you live from Ottawa. I'll be back again tomorrow at the usual time, 10 o'clock. Thank you for being a supporter. Subscribe, resubscribe if you have to, and it's so much appreciated.